Works to be a voice for citizens and a force for change. By staying informed on issues and acting in a non-partisan manner, we're able to influence public policy in a way that promotes problem solving. Our goal is to make democracy work for all citizens. And I thank you very, very much for being here today. We have a stellar group of speakers that have joined us today. And first is Noguera. He is the Director of Housing and Neighborhood Revitalization for the City of Dallas. Myriam Igoufe is a co-principal investigator and project manager for the North Texas Regional Housing Assessment. Rollins is Executive Director of Texas Tenants Union. Sherman Roberts is President and CEO of Citywide Community Development Corporation. And Ahmad is founder and president of Homeowners for Better Building. And there's a little bit more information for you, but I'm sure they will tell you a little bit more. And now I have been asked to do the welcome in Spanish. Mi nombre es Cecilia McKay. Yo soy la presidenta de la Liga de Mujeres Votantes. Y estamos aquí para escuchar una presentación acerca de housing. Y con nosotros aquí están el señor Lwvd Noguera. Él es el director de Housing and Neighborhood Revitalization for the City of Dallas. La señora Myriam Igoufe es co-principal investigadora y project manager for the North Texas Regional Housing Assessment. Rollins es la directora ejecutiva de Texas Tenants Union. Sherman Roberts es presidente y CEO de Citywide Community Development. Finally, Ahmad is fundadora y presidenta de Homeowners for Better Building. Please join me in welcoming the speakers. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our VP of Program and the person responsible, along with a stellar group of committee members for this program today and for all the programming for the League of Women Voters. Diane.
So, I am a newbie at being moderator, so you will just have to bear with me a little as I stumble my way through this process. First of all, I want to say welcome. Yes, absolutely. So glad you could all come. And I'm also advised to give some housekeeping. So for those of you who have not already discovered, just outside the door and to the right and then to the left are the restrooms. Okay. I want to acknowledge the planning committee, actually the study group in the League that is working on affordable housing and gentrification. The members, the co-chairs are Susie Bell and me. Deborah Moore is here. Jeannie Fritz is here. Pat Stevens, I haven't seen Pat. Maybe she's coming tonight, I think. Mary Milam, Stephanie Hansen, Al Richard, Norma Shusett, Norma's in the back, Cynthia Hahn, and Mary Bowles. We have been studying this subject for some time, and it is a complicated, very complicated subject. We have a very diverse group of people to give you information. Let's see. We have a videographer. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. As we start, would you maintain volume as all of the other speakers as well, for those of us who are hearing challenged.
Thank you for asking. Absolutely. I will try to project. I'm not that good at it, but remind me again if you need to.
All right.
Okay? Thank you. We have a videographer. Mason is here. Thank you guys for doing a great job. They did the videography for the previous program we had at the end of August on education. Now we have rules. Somebody been identified as a timer?
I'm going to.
Okay, Susie Bell is the timer. All right, the way this works is that she has 2 colored cards for our speakers to be aware of. The yellow card and the red. You want to tell them what that's about?
I will hold up the yellow card when you have about 5 minutes to go, since you have 15 minutes each. And then this will be time to stop. We want to have everything fair in the league in a democratic process. So, you know, you can finish your idea, but wrap it up quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Also, we have a little bit of biographical information on each one of our speakers in the program that was on the table outside. If you didn't get that, please pick up one on your way out. Also on the table outside were 2 articles that have been, well, sort of recently. One is in June and the other one is very recent, about housing. If you haven't been reading the paper, the Dallas Morning News or the Observer or the Texas Tribune, then you may not be aware that there is a lot of press out there about affordable housing. So Google it if you want, and just dive in. There's a lot of press out there. There's also a lot of thoughtful research out there that is available for you to explore. Let's see. After the speakers have spoken for their 15 minutes each, there will be a question and answer period. We've tried to make it so that, I need to zip this up quick so that they can get started, so that we have plenty of time for questions and answers. One of our volunteers, or more, will spread out the little white note cards, and if you need a pencil, we have pencils to share if you need those too. And if you will hold them up when you have your question ready, we will come around and pick it up, and then I will present the questions to the speakers. Okay? So we shall begin. Our first speaker is Lwvd Noguera. Mr. Noguera, you have 15 minutes.
Well, thank you, thank you.
And it's hard to encapsulate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. First, let me thank you all for having me here today, and thank you for engaging on this topic. I think whether you're a homeowner, a tenant, or just a concerned resident of the city, we should all take an interest in housing issues because it affects the DNA of our community.
Would you please stand?
Where we live.
Would you please stand?
Oh, so you would like me to come to the podium maybe?
Yeah. You just stand right there if you
Well,
want.
that's a little awkward. I'm surrounded by people. But, okay. So what I wanted to share with you in the few moments that I'm up here is an update on some of the activity that's been going on with the city of Dallas related to housing. In May of this year, the city adopted a comprehensive housing policy. And it's depending on what part of the city or local politics you represent or participate in, you may or may not have been following it. But it has gotten quite a bit of attention, right? And I think it's good because it gives us some exposure to the issues that we're all dealing with. Right? Just to give you a brief synopsis of what it is, The comprehensive housing policy serves as a clearinghouse for programs, goals, and development priorities that we've established. I will tell you that there is wide debate on whether we got it right? Whether the programs and the goals are appropriate. But I think it's a good starting point for a discussion on some pretty challenging issues. You know, it was Tuesday, I think Myriam participated in a discussion with council about poverty, all right? And she's just kind of describing the issue, and the big question is, okay, how do you solve it, right? Well, any one of these issues, affordable housing, poverty, they're not issues that you just sort of flip a switch and fix it overnight. But I think what this housing policy does is give us that starting point to begin the discussion. I wanted to share with you just a little bit about what it covers. Number one, through the policy, we determined that there's approximately 20,000 units that we are short of housing, right? And that's both for sale apartments as well across the city. And for anyone who understands supply and demand, when there's a shortage of housing units, it causes the price of those units to go up, be it through rent, be it through home sales. And for those people who are at the lower end of the income spectrum, they feel it the most, right? We learned that through the housing policy, about 6 out of 10 families are cost burdened. And what we mean by cost burdened is that more than 30% of their income goes to housing alone. We have issues of overcrowding in many of the housing units that are currently available. And then we have issues of insufficient opportunities to build wealth, right? Families who may want to purchase homes, who may want to live in areas where they have more affordable access to jobs and better schools, but because of financial limitations, they just don't simply have that. So these are the issues that we've been trying to tackle with the housing policy. I'll tell you from what we learned, we developed 3 overarching goals for what we wanted to achieve. Number 1, we wanted to create and maintain affordable housing, right? And that is housing for anyone from what we call 30% of the area median income to upwards of about 120%. And it's important that we have a wide range, because what we're trying to establish is mixed income communities, and to deconcentrate these communities that have high poverty. The other one is fair housing, right? We want to be able to give, the housing policy strives to help people afford housing in areas that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do that, and access it, even when they have the funding, whether it be through their own means or some subsidies, perhaps a voucher, right? We want to make sure that the landlords and property owners out there are giving them the opportunity to rent from them. And then the third one is overcoming these patterns of segregation, right? So when we're looking at where to build affordable housing, do we continue to build it in the same parts of the city year after year after year, right? How do we start to change that narrative? So one of the key tools that was used in developing this policy was something we called a market value analysis. And that's where we look at real estate conditions across the city to understand where those high-value properties are located, where the low-value properties are located, where the communities that have high concentrations of government subsidies are located, where the code violations and the foreclosures are taking place in different parts of the city. And using that information, we selected about 15 priority areas. Because one of the things that we found prior to developing the comprehensive housing policy is that we used a citywide approach, where we would take the limited funding and resources that the city had and just kind of sprinkle them around all across the city. And while those individuals or those individual developers that received some benefit from those programs, the challenge was that you really couldn't see a difference in the community overall at the end of the day. So we started from the perspective of prioritizing geographic areas where we're going to make our investments was important to really try to turn the dial on redevelopment efforts in those neighborhoods and then branch out to others. I mentioned at the beginning that there has been wide debate about housing policy. This is one of the critical areas, right? Because what you'll see, and I'm sorry, if I knew I had to bring up a PowerPoint, I would have, because I'm looking at one, but I don't have it to share with you, so I apologize. But what you'll see when you look at the housing policy is that we've identified 15 areas, right? And there's thoughts, okay, you didn't get it right? It should have been these other areas. Right? And I think there's good arguments on either side of the table as to what those areas should be. But I believe the starting point is, do you prioritize or do you use a citywide approach? And I think we did get it right from the standpoint of realizing you have limited funds to go around. If you're going to make an impact, prioritizing where your dollars go is critical. So we have 3 different types of areas that we lay out in our priorities. The first is what we call redevelopment areas. And in the higher cost markets, in the stronger real estate markets in the city, these are areas where we're looking for shovel-ready projects that we can build affordable housing. They're often called high opportunity areas, because they have low concentrations of poverty, because they have good schools, and if we're going to be developing affordable housing at any scale, then these are some of the primary places that it would fit in nicely. Then we move to what we call stabilization areas. And I think this really touches on the topic of today's conference, gentrification. Right? Our stabilization areas are those areas where prices have started to creep up. Right? Landlords have started to sell off their rental properties because they can cash out with some nice profits. And for tenants in particular, they're often priced out of the market, right? Because the rents are either going up, or the landlord is closing down the property, and they're forced to find alternate places to live, and they often at times can't find other places to live in that area, even though they've lived there their entire lives. Right? For homeowners, it's also challenging. Thank you. It's also challenging because property values are going up. So we have communities where these smaller bungalows may be knocked down, and you'll see a mini mansion pop up in its place, and that causes property taxes to shoot up. So you'll have many senior citizens who their home is paid for, and they weren't expecting this additional cost burden of these higher taxes. So they're often encouraged from a financial standpoint to move because it just doesn't make sense financially for them to stay. And then finally, we have our emerging markets. And these are the areas that still struggle to define what the market is. They still struggle to attract developers, and we want to make investments that are going to encourage development to come there. So everything from infrastructure to transportation to code compliance, even crime, right? The things that impact your decision on where you choose to live based on those various factors. So this is kind of a broad brush of what you find in our policy. Just in the essence of time, I'll tell you that overall, from a program perspective, what you see in the policy are programs that look at the development of housing, programs that look at the rehabilitation of existing housing, and programs that help people become home buyers, right? One of the challenges that I think we'll continue to have is measuring the effectiveness of each of the programs that we've deployed and giving ourselves the flexibility. I know I often get in trouble with our council members because they say, oh, there you go again with that flexibility word. But we need the flexibility, because as much as we strive to get it right, there's always room for improvement, right? And depending on how fast the markets are changing, we have to be nimble enough to change with it. So if it takes me 6 months to get a change through, right? You look at all the people that have been impacted and all of the poor performing programs that have continued to exist because I have that delay, right? So one of the key factors in the housing policy is the addition of the Housing Policy Task Force, right? And this is a group that is made up of industry experts and city staff, so that we can come together in different forums around different topics to really evaluate what's working, what's not, what are some ideas that we should be looking at. And I'll tell you, we just started ramping up efforts in these areas, but I have been pleased with the commitment level, right? Because these industry experts aren't being paid to participate in this stuff. So it's important that we harness their expertise and their experiences to learn more about how we can refine these programs, right? It's actually through the Housing Task Force that I met Miss Suzabel, right? And I learned about your group and this event today. So I think the housing policy is a work in progress. It's a good first step from where we were before, and I invite your questions and your thoughts on how we can continue to refine it to better utilize taxpayer dollars and address the housing needs across the city of Dallas. Thank you.
Next, we will have Myriam Igoufe. Myriam just received her PhD.
Oh, 6 months ago.
6 months ago, okay.
I'm old now. I'm a real doctor.
And she worked on the regional housing assessment in the process of getting her PhD. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you so much.
And I'm very pleased that you can be here to speak. Thank you.
My pleasure. Well, I do have a presentation for you all. How's everybody this morning? Doing great? Good. I heard you guys are very engaged, so I have an interactive presentation for you. Let's see. All right, perfect. Anybody heard of the North Texas Regional Housing Assessment? Please lie and raise your hand. Don't embarrass me right now, okay?
I'm gonna pull the screen down for you.
I'm
Oh,
sorry
yeah,
to say, the screen might make a difference.
Now that you see better, did you ever hear of this? Right, that's what I thought.
There we go.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I only have, is this gonna work? All right, it's gonna work. 15 minutes, I'm gonna try to be very quick. I will give you a brief overview of what is the assessment of fair housing. We'll focus, of course, on affordability pressures that is plaguing our city and the region, and then some of the discussion about some of the community barriers to self-sufficiency. So the assessment of fair housing is not just any housing study. Right? It's a fair housing study that was mandated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development back in 2015. And the exercise is very heavy data-driven and is designed to foster regional collaboration, so it's a lot of data. And we've been doing this as a 21 entity group, which is the largest one in the country to do this. So like we've done a very good job working together to decipher what is the landscape of fair housing. So affordability. How would you define affordability? I am not providing the answer today, guys. Yes,
I think it's not 30% of adjusted income, even though that's what HUD and every other governmental entity says.
You are forbidden to answer my question. I knew she was trouble. You're up, you can answer. Anybody else?
Not enough.
What is affordability? How would you define it in your own words?
I think it should be for whatever that area that they're living in can afford. Because when they come in and do whatever, then it raises up everything and you can't afford it.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
You can pay for your housing, whether it's rent or a house payment, and you can still eat, you can still maintain your car or afford transportation, and you have money left over to do the other things you need to do.
I already like you. Yes. Yes, sir.
And then in a sort of a combat against gentrification, you'll be able to afford it next year and the year after that. It's not just I bought it this year, I'm set this year, but I'll have a budget for my future.
Very well. So we're looking at just not housing, but a lot of basic needs, and also just a long-term concept. It's not just today, but it's tomorrow and after tomorrow, maybe my kids. All right. How do you measure it? Cindy, you're not answering this. How would you measure affordability? At the end of the month, what you have left? You guys are so good. You already have my whole presentation figured out. So this is a study that was put together by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. And what they have done is to look at what can you afford on a minimum wage, all right? And if you work for $7.25 an hour in Texas, you would have to work 86 hours a week to afford a modest one-bedroom. That's a lot of hours in a week, right? I mean, I got a PhD and I wasn't working that much. Also, if you work 40 hours a week at $7.25, you can afford a $377 bedroom. If you find that, let your girl know, okay? I need to know that. The next two graph that you see, the first one is just telling you that rent keeps on going up in Dallas, and that's something that we have to take cognizant of. It keeps on going up. Those are the market conditions that we're facing. The graph at the bottom, which was put together by BC Workshop, is showing, what are we building? And over the years, we're not building a lot of affordable housing, but much more higher end, right? So what's, minimum wage, market conditions, this is where we are. So I think we're all aware that the rule of thumb for affordable housing is 30% of your income, right? If you spend more than 30% of your income, you're a cost burden. I've done a lot of research on this. This 30% ratio comes from the 19th century. All right, that's a long time ago, guys, right? And so what they have done is to look at very primitive statistics to describe, how much people are spending towards housing, and to say, well, since you spend this much, that must be affordable to you, right? So there is actually no real statistical or conceptual theoretical background to justify why 30% of your income is what is deemed affordable. And actually, for those German statisticians in the 19th century who came up with this rule of thumb, this is what they say. We're proposing that the percentage of income that a household paid towards housing and utility is invariably the same, no matter the income. So the intent is fairly explicit, and it's still at heart of our federal programs today, mortgages, and all across the world, truthfully. Now, just for the disclaimer, now we're looking at transportation as well, and we're no longer looking at 30% of your income, but 45% of your income towards housing and transportation. But we're still looking at a ratio, right, which is highly problematic. So I have a quiz for you guys, now that I have a PhD. Everybody's graded on this, y'all. Case study. John has an annual income of $500,000 a year. He spends 31% of his income towards housing. So he's above the affordability, right? Now you have Elizabeth. She has an annual income of $9,000, but she spends 29% of her income towards housing. Who's caused burden?
Elizabeth.
I don't know. Who? John, Elizabeth, is it fake news? No, you're not. Who's caused burden? Oh, you torn, huh? It's not cool. So this is, how we have to be very careful about the type of metrics that we use to say this is what's happening or it's not happening. Obviously, Elizabeth is probably having a hard time feeding her kids if she has some, right? Or if she has a disability. How is she making it happen? I think John is doing pretty well. And if it's hiring, then he needs to let me know. So just a little bit of data to know what's the landscape of affordability in Dallas. Just big data. What we see is that, of course, renters are much more cost burden than homeowners. And I think that's something that we have to acknowledge and own. And as governmental entities are making decisions on who to assist at a greater extent, then we have to be cognizant of those numbers again. So quick synopsis, I know you don't have time to watch the whole table. The renters are much more likely to be cost burden at 30%, and I'm sorry, spending more than 30% of your income. Again, keep it in mind that it doesn't really mean a lot, especially when you are at the lower end of the income spectrum. So 30% AMI, 50% AMI are disproportionately cost burden in our city and the region, truthfully. So many quiz. What factors affect affordability? I'm gonna stare at people. Yes, ma'am.
Location?
What? That was my, I didn't think anybody would say that. Okay, you're right. Awesome.
We're smart.
Yeah, wow. Come on. Anything else? I only have 15 minutes, y'all. All right. Location and geography, thank you for killing it. For me, policies and place-based investment, obviously, right? So, oh my God, maps. 2 maps. The first one with the pink areas are areas that are designated as recaps. Put simply, they are racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty. For the city of Dallas, we're looking at poverty, we're looking at racial and economic segregation, so extreme level of poverty. The other map with the red and the green shows you patterns of segregation. Red are neighborhood with a disproportionately greater share of white household, and green, a disproportional share of non-white households. And you can see a very clear dividing line between the northern sector and the southern sector, right? So this is the landscape that we have to stay cognizant of, right? Now, you have all of these great maps with the location of housing choice vouchers, families. Everybody's familiar with the program? If not, this is how it works. The government gives a housing subsidy to a family, and the family has the opportunity to go and take it to a landlord and say, hey, I want to live there, as long as the voucher pays for the rent. Now, what the map shows is the location of housing choice vouchers families in our city. Put simply, our most vulnerable families that we're spending public dollars on are still living in the most segregated neighborhood and in poverty. Why? So, just as a quick numbers for you guys, in those very severely segregated neighborhoods, you have an average of 85 housing choice voucher family. And in another neighborhood that is not plagued with segregation, you only have 22 of those housing choice vouchers families. So you can see the disproportionalities. I'm gonna try to move fast because I have a lot of good stuff, I think, coming up. All right, so why so? Source of income discrimination, anybody heard of it? Yeah. So it's the ability of the landlord to say, you know what, I don't want your money, because it's public dollars, right? You might still be able to pay for the asking price. You might still be able to pass the background check and all the things that other households are able to do. But I just don't want your money, all right? And that's legal in Texas. You have 3 maps here. The one on the left is showing the location of landlords refusing vouchers, right? So the dots are the landlords saying, you know what, I don't want your voucher. And you see that they are in those red area, right, which are white, permanently white neighborhood. 5 minutes. On the other side, on the very far right, you have the locations of vouchers, and you can see that it's a mirror picture right? And obviously vouchers are living where, well, they're actually not found where landlords are refusing vouchers. So we have to be very careful about the policy landscape that is affecting affordability, because we have made housing affordable to those families. But policy is saying, you know what, no, it's not going to be affordable to you. I sound like an advocate. All right, so I think we all heard of, we're going to triple the rent for those HUD-assisted families. There's too many workers' incentive. Let's stop being lazy. So that was what my dissertation looked into. And so I was interested to see, you know what, wheel aside, can HUD-assisted families actually afford to achieve self-sufficiency? So I looked into whether or not housing trust vouchers families were able to afford transportation. And I did not use the 30% old rule with no basis. I have used what you guys have kind of alluded to, what is called a residual income approach. So instead of looking into how much of your income is devoted towards housing or transportation, I take your income and I take off the price of housing, utility, childcare, healthcare, what else are we paying for? Hygiene, all the but transportation, right?
Car insurance.
But transportation. I want to know, can you afford transportation? So I have operationalized this residual income for transportation, and what I have found is that housing trust vouchers families that are they're the neediest in our region, in our city. And also, just to give you a sense of who they are about 30% to 50% AMI. They are those cost burden that we have discussed earlier, right? So the numbers, I've done two different types of scenarios. The first one is private transportation, and the second one, public transportation. 75% of housing trust vouchers families in our region are unable to buy, maintain, and operate a car. And I looked at about 29,000 families. This is not negligible, right? The next step is let's assume they already have a car. Can they maintain and operate their car? So gas, car insurance, all that good stuff, right? 63% of them still cannot afford transportation. And they are living in those segregated neighborhoods that I have described earlier, right? And they are cost burden, although they are part of an affordable housing program. We have to rethink the way we appreciate, I'm gonna have to say it, HUD programs, whether we are fulfilling our missions and things of that nature. Now, public transit, right? Public transit. Can you afford a monthly regional transit pass for your family? Close to 6 out of 10 families are unable to afford transit. That's a lot, right? Now, let's say, can you afford transit just for the adults and half of the dependents? 55% of them cannot do that. Then for just the adults, forget the kids or forget your dependents. 54% of them are unable to afford transportation. Now, this is just one person in a household. Just one is traveling for transit. 52% of them are unable to afford transportation. And yes, they're part of affordable housing programs. They're supposed to be good to go. Right now, we have to rethink the numbers, and we have to think strategically about what it means to be facing affordability issues. I'm going to try to move very fast. There's another map that is coming in 3, 2, 1. Come on. All right. So what it shows, spectrum of color from blue to yellow, from a lot of jobs accessible through by a 30-minute transit commute to much more jobs in yellow. And what it shows, very similar to those pink areas that I have shown earlier, the segregated neighborhoods, you have less jobs accessible if you live in certain parts of the city. All that to say that we have to understand the landscape to be able to make the right decision, to be able to tailor our programs and make the right policy decisions to bridge the gap to those who are still left behind, despite the fact that they are receiving affordable housing, or despite the fact that they're spending 29% of their income. What is your income to start with, right? So we have to stay cognizant not only of the numbers being thrown at us, but also the geography of inequity that is characterizing the city of Dallas and the DFW region. So as a result of this 2.5-year research, we have put together goals in the help of the community to affirmatively further fair housing, which applies to transportation, economic development, of course, housing, parks and recreation, all of that. And those are the goals, and I'm not going to bother you with it. You can find it on our website, which is northtexasrha.com. I am done with the commercial, and I believe I'm under 15 minutes. Yeah, next wave.
some lights, hold on a second.
Well, I've got a PowerPoint also.
Oh, you
so I
do?
can-
Okay, so you don't need light?
I don't think so.
Okay, so this is Sandy Rollins, and she's the founder and CEO, ED.
I'm not the founder, and I'm the executive director.
ED, Executive Director of Texas Tenants Unions, but you've been at it for decades.
I have.
Yes, expert.
It's actually. Okay, there we go. And I know I've got more than 15 minutes worth of material, so I'm going to go kind of fast through some of my stuff so I can get to the real meaty policy stuff. You can probably tell from the get-go that I don't have a PhD or Myriam's presentation computer skills, but so you have the knowledge.
Yeah, much more experience than I could.
Anyway, just a little background on the Texas Tenants Union. It started in 1973 as the East Dallas Tenants Alliance, and the Texas Tenants Union incorporated in 1979 to start working on getting things into the Texas Property Code or the Texas statutes. We've been doing free tenants' rights workshops every Wednesday night since 1973. I usually try to do easy things on Thursday where I don't have to interact with human beings because I'm really tired. But anyway, I appreciate you doing this, and here I am. We do tenant organizing as our capacity allows. Historically, with tenants in HUD-assisted properties that were at risk either to convert to market rate housing or due to substandard conditions. More recently, in the hot gentrification situations like the HMK families in West Dallas that got a 30-day notice the properties were closing rather than the owner complying with city code, and then earlier this year with the tenants at North Park Terrace and Victory Meadow when DISD purchased their property to put up a school and used some pretty underhanded ways to try to get people out that were not at all respectful to the tenants who lived there, many of whom had school-age children and were being almost forced out before the end of the school year. Through the organizing and with representation from legal aid, the people who were still there this spring, did get a better deal, got increased relocation help and commitment that they could stay before the school year ended. You probably know, problems and indicators. There's a lot out there. I'm not going to spend a whole lot on this, but the one thing I want to focus on here is that the city, through their market value analysis, came up with 20,000 units short for both home ownership and rental. BC Workshop did a state of housing report in 2017 that found that there's 68,000 households in Dallas that can't afford to pay more than $400 a month for housing. That would be both rental and homeowner. But and that rings very true based on what we see at our office. And so I'm going to dump on the city a little bit. The comprehensive policy. This is part of the wide debate. I think is focused in the wrong areas. So the 20,000 units, most are for more than half are for home ownership, but on the rental, they've got the goal of twice as many for people at 100 and 120% of the area median income as they do for people making 30 and 50%. I understand mixed income housing. I'm not opposed to mixed income housing, but properties are being developed. You can see, and the older properties that were more affordable are being torn down for this new development. So the high-end properties are being built. We've got market rate and above market rate housing in this town. If we could make those developers do the set-asides and use the limited city money to incentivize units for people at 30% and below, I think that would be a better approach. The city also, the city is complicit in the situation we're in right now. And it's been complicit for decades. The institutional racism that founded this country is alive and well and has been alive and well in Dallas, Texas. So, for instance, these tax increment financing districts are all over the place, and millions go to wealthy developers to put up new housing. So before David got here, there was a guy named Zavalowski, I think, the head of the Economic Development Department. Okay, so he's briefing the council's housing committee on what was the most successful TIF district, and he says Uptown. So for those of you who are, my age or older and have been in Dallas for this period of time, might know that Uptown was the original Freedmen's Town in Dallas. It was in an African-American neighborhood. Adjacent to State Thomas was Little Mexico. That was a thriving Latino neighborhood. So if those are the most successful, if Uptown is the most successful TIF, this city is, it's just shameful. So the same thing's going on right now in West Dallas, same thing's going on right now in Bishop Arts, and I'm not seeing that the city housing policy that just got passed is going to change any of that. So let me move, I'll stop dumping on the city for a second, move to state law. But so Texas is a very landlord-friendly state. It's very easy to evict somebody here. Anybody who signs a Texas Apartment Association lease signs away their right to a 3-day notice for eviction and is allowed to get a 24-hour notice to vacate. Court date comes up in 10 to 21 days. You have 5 days to move out or appeal. There is no just cause eviction protection in this state, so in private housing. So in other words, when your lease is up, they don't have to have a reason to ask you to move. They can just say, your lease is up, here's your 30-day notice, or here's your 60-day notice. It goes worse from that, and I'll get to that in a second. There's also no opportunity to cure a default in an eviction. Most states have this. Even Mississippi has the opportunity to cure a default, which means instead of giving, here's your 24-hour notice to get out, it's here's your 3 days or here's your 5 days to pay the rent or gut. We don't have that in state law. There are no counterclaims in eviction cases. So if you've withheld rent, which you're not allowed to do, because you got raw sewage flowing down your hallway every month, it doesn't matter. You can't make that claim in eviction court. So you have to, file a separate suit. Most states do have some provision for withholding rent or payment into an escrow account for severely substandard conditions. Texas doesn't. City of Dallas doesn't. And then landlords also have some additional remedies short of going to court to put pressure on tenants, like changing the locks on the door. They are supposed to give the tenant a copy of the key whether they pay rent or not. They can also seize certain property to hold until rent's paid, so to just add to the misery. So you probably know we have no rent control. That would be a dirty word in this state. But we've seen tenants over the last few years with massive rent increases. I'm not talking about $25 or $50 a month. I'm talking about $150 and $200 and $300 all at a pop, which of course people's incomes are not going up, at that pace. So, but on top of that, landlords are getting more and more and more creative about the kinds of extra charges that they pile on to the basic rent. So there's the trash pickup fee. There's the pest control fee, which never applies to bed bugs, by the way. There's a mandatory valet trash pickup fee. Some properties have mandatory cable TV fees. I don't care if you don't watch television, can't afford it and don't want it. If you don't sign a new contract, and in some cases aren't offered to sign a new contract, they'll pile on month-to-month fees. There are fees added to utility billing. And so there's no regulation at all on any of these things, except for late fees. And our organization worked about 10 years ago now, to try to get a limit on late fees, because we see people, on the very low end, it would be $25 for the first day and $5 per day thereafter. On the high end, it's maybe $100 for the first day and 10 or 15 for each day thereafter. And it can be deducted from the actual rent. And so, yeah, so the Texas Apartment Association, again, has a contract, number 34 of that lease says, any money you pay us, we can apply to outstanding charges before we apply it to rent. And so that way they say you still owe rent and the late fees continue to accumulate. People come into our office all the time. They're like, paid rent in full, I paid it 1 day late, I know I owe this initial late charge. And you know, they get a number on a Post-it note a couple weeks later from the manager saying you owe this. And it's, how can I possibly owe this? We think the clock ought to stop ticking there. The lease allows, and many properties are now converting to online rent payment only, including at tax credit properties where there are voucher holders that live. You know, if your income is $800 a month, and there are people that have an income of less than that, you might not even have a bank account, much less a smartphone, much less a computer, right? You get your check, your check goes straight out within 24 hours, just paying what you owe. And so for the places that require online rent payment, it means going to get a prepaid debit card or a MoneyGram or something that comes with lots of extra fees that, of course, somebody on extremely limited income don't have. It allows, the Texas Apartment Association lease allows, somebody can sign a year contract, and is that my 5 minutes? Okay, I'm gonna have to really speed it up. To give a 30-day notice when they're ready to redevelop. So I'm gonna skip, yeah, it's just, so this is the clause, number 20, oops, back. Number 26.5 of this lease says, you know, in the event of a disaster, we're going to give you a 5-day notice, which happened to people in Houston after Harvey. But they've also got buried in here, we're going to give you a 30-day notice if we're going to demolish. And so, you know, that has happened. And you can, you know, when you sign a lease, you should have an expectation, right, that you're good for a year, you're good for 6 months. But in this very landlord-friendly state and city, you know, when they're ready, they're going to take it. So this is a notice that somebody brought in on one of our Wednesday night workshops, and it was, you know, I might not be able to make that work again, but yeah, it's 30-day notice in accordance with 26.5. This guy had signed a year's lease and got this notice about 3 months after he got there. This is Trammell Crow, who has displaced people over and over and over again in this town. This went to a place called Village Square, which is now luxury housing's going in. It's on Throckmorton near the toll road. Veterans there, very low income people, people made homeless. People are made homeless each and every time they get a 30-day notice through their fault of their own, because it's just not enough time to be able to move and secure other housing. This is one of my favorites too. A 3-day notice to vacate due to repositioning of the property. Again, this is a place that the tenants had lease contracts in. They did back off, it's illegal. But anyway, in terms of voucher assistance, you know, the acceptance rates are dismal because landlords don't have to take them. There are a number of states, I think 15 that have source of income legislation, and many local jurisdictions that prohibit discrimination against voucher holders. I think the 15 states, the reason I put 13 there is because not all of them explicitly cover voucher holders. And the Texas legislature made things worse by passing statute in 2015 saying that cities and counties can't do that. Dallas has a very limited one based on if an owner gets any sort of development incentives or, you know, upzoning or something. So we had recommendations that have been submitted to the city in terms of, you know, source of income protection, using zoning to preserve existing housing, including tenants in notification when zoning hearings are, that affect their housing is, you know, being heard. But primarily it's our resources should be going for people in the greatest need, not for people at the upper income levels. You know, if you make $61,000 a year as one person, which I think is the 120% level or so, you know, and you're paying too much for your housing, you know, you might not go out to dinner as much, you might not get as good a vacation, you might not buy a new car. But if you're somebody whose income is $12,000 a year and you're paying too much, it means you're not eating, it means you're not buying your medicine. And so I just feel like we need to focus in a better place. Some cities have relocation ordinances, you know, long-term notice, not a 30-day in the middle of your lease, no displacement of school-age children during the school year, relocation assistance if you're asked to move through no fault of your own or get a massive rent increase. The city of, Washington, D.C. has something called the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which gives the right of first purchase. Last legislative session, Royce West introduced a bill to try to help deal with displacement gentrification. It did not pass. We'll see what happens this coming session, but again, long-term notice, no displacement, opportunity to acquire. Victoria Neave last session introduced a bill to try to give more notice on a rent increase, because the Texas Property Code doesn't actually explicitly mention how much notice needs to be given on a rent increase. There's language on the term of a lease. And so at this point, most tenants get 5 days more than what they would have to give if they're going to give a notice that they're moving. But again, when you're being hit with a $200 or $300 rent increase at a pop, and you've been someplace for years on end, you don't know what the market is. And if that happens to come when you're sick or you've got a busy week, you know, you need more time to figure out whether or not you're going to stay and pay way more than you can afford in rent, or whether or not you're going to try to get out of there and find something that's not rat infested that you can afford. Other bills to expunge eviction records when tenants win, because those are public records and they follow people, and it can impact whether or not they are rented to again. This one was relating to the online rent payment or deposits, so that low-income people are not punished by not having bank accounts. And some, you know, we do have some people that just don't want to put their financial business online. They've had their identity stolen in the past, and they're not comfortable conducting financial transactions online. But none of those things passed, so there's still another chance. More reforms that are needed. It would be nice if Texas joined most of the rest of the country, including Mississippi, on the opportunity to cure. Okay, so I'm almost, yeah, so I'll leave it there. I've got my card. I do have some, those written recommendations are, I can leave up here if anybody wants them.
Affordable housing using programs for a long time here in Dallas. He has a lot of experience. He's one of the few successful developers doing that, and so it's going to be very interesting to hear what he has to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I didn't bring a presentation, so I could have gave Sandy some of my time, because that was very interesting, because what she was talking about, you do run into that as a developer and owner of projects. You run into trying to work with the tenants, trying to help them out, and our laws are very lax. You can't put people out right away. Again, my name is Sherman Roberts. I'm the president of Citywide Community Development Corporation. And I had a PowerPoint, but I didn't bring it because after I saw the title, can your family afford to live in Dallas? I was going to say no, but in some parts of Dallas, you can't afford it, because now affordability is going out the door. I'm specifically a nonprofit developer that is federally organized under the city of Dallas through what we call CHODO program, Community Housing Development Organization. And you can look that up online, go to the HUD website and just say CHD organization. And it tells you how we have to be structured. We're a regular nonprofit, but we also go a step further. And that access us to work with some of the programs that the Lwvd department have and administer to us. So what we do is try to go into these distressed areas. And one of the distressed areas that the housing policy, I'm not going to dump on you, but I am going to talk about the policy. Will be because, you know, some things in the policy, we need a starting point to work with. But I also think that with this policy, it should be changeable and not 6 months or 7 months down the road. If you're falling off a cliff, you ain't gonna fall down and then say, oh, I should have stopped right there, put a barrier in there. If you see that it's not working right then, we should be able to change it. But that goes back to groups like y'all helping us go in to fight the political will. We just don't have the political will around the horseshoe that want to make these things move. Segregation and discrimination and gentrification is because of policies. That's all it is. It's because of policies. It's not that here's the North and the South and they're always going to be like that. It's because the policies that we make. And in this housing policy that we got right now, we're going to keep doing that until we say, okay, South Dallas, you know where South Dallas is. Let's put the resources over in South Dallas. We are too much into, we want to have mixed income developments. I'm not against mixed income developments. I want them in the southern sector because that's where the money should go. For-profit developers going to make their money. They're going to build no matter what. And they build it and not using, you know, the vouchers, because we're in a state where we say you don't have to, landlords don't have to. And I'm on a state agency board, and we're still fighting that right now. We'll go back to legislation again, and I don't know if our city political will is fighting that, but we should be fighting things like that. But what I do as a community housing development organization, I build affordable housing, and I try to build it from 80% and below the median income. So we try to take people at 30, 40, and 50%, because that's where the need is. So, you know, the need is there. And I'm working in an area, as Lwvd alluded to, is you got the redevelopment areas and you got the stabilization areas. Well, I'm in an area where they call emerging markets, where we need a lot of infrastructure in order to develop. But I was developing there, but now through the housing policy, I can't really develop like I want to and like I need to, because that's where the need is. I look at affordability, and if you for people who need housing around 150 to 175,000 that they want to buy. Affordability now has become 200,000, 250, and that's kind of hard for a person that's working, you know, making minimum wage or just making above minimum wage. But they deserve the same kind of housing, the same kind of opportunity as people in the north or any other parts of the city. But our policies says the way we want to do it, we want to do mixed income. We want to bring people back from DeSoto and Cedar Hill and Richardson. I mean, if they don't want to be here, why we should give them the incentive to come here? You know, and so I think what we should be doing, and this is just my opinion, and I keep stressing this, in the distressed areas, let's make those areas be the mixed income. I don't think you should always have to bus people out of a neighborhood. Let's build that neighborhood up so it can be a mixed income development. Because you find people that was raised in their community, go to church there, they got family there. You're not gonna, I don't care how much money you give them. They're not gonna move out of their community. But yet they want the same amenities that everybody else has. And the reason why these areas got there like that is the lack of money and a lack of services that they deserve. And I think you're going to see that change a lot because the areas are being attractive. If we're not developing these areas around the fair parks and around the Lancaster corridors, I mean, if people start moving out, then you're bringing gentrification in. We talked about the uptown. We know what uptown was. I mean, we know what West Dallas was. I can see it right now. Fair Park. I just came from a Fair Park meeting of the Greater Dallas Planning Council this morning, you know, and I can tell you now, if we don't protect the outer part of Fair Park, it's gonna be gentrification. And I mean, you don't need a rocket, you don't need a PhD. You don't need a PhD to tell you that. You already know that. And the politicians know that. They know that. I've been screaming this down their throat, and I'm going to continue to do it. And I told them I am until I die now, because I see what's happening to this great city. So every parts of the city should have the same opportunity. As I said, the policy is a good start, but it should be a movable instrument. We shouldn't have to wait all the way till the 6 months. And this is not against Lwvd. I think Lwvd, he really believes in what he does. And there's things in there that he does try to amend and try to make available. So I'm not trying to beat on him, because a lot of this had started a little bit before he had gotten here. But I work in, what I do is affordable housing, and I really mean affordable housing. We do LIHTC, we do single family for first-time homeowners, around 140, 150. Now that price is going up since I can't build in my area. I used to be able to buy a lot for $5,000, now it's $25,000. We do housing for homeless women with children, that we bring them out of the shelters, and we work with DHA to help them with their rent. We help them to find jobs, so that's what we try to do. We did do a mixed income development where we had half of the units were for mixed income and half of them were affordability. That does work. We need more of those. One of the things that I've been pushing, I used to push, is an empowerment zone, where we can have an area where there's authority to run that empowerment zone, and not just have our political council members. Because when you start dealing with the political people, they're going to say, well, my district needs this, my district needs that. And they pull it away from the need. And the need and the money that comes into the city should be in an area, and it should be administered to people who are going to put it where it's most needed at. And not just say, well, give me some new side streets because I got a crack. When you go to the south, you don't even have sidewalks. You know, you see people driving in the middle of the street with their go-karts. But the way our system is set up, each council member, is going to want their fair share. And that's what we're running into. And so if we had an empowerment zone, we can put the federal money along with other monies into this, and because a lot of cities have that. And so, I don't want to throw a lot of statistics out because the PhD doctor did real good here. But, cost of living is just going up, and the rental part, as she said, is just increasing. The statistics that I pull, a studio, we do have studios. Right now, our studios are going for $545, and we can't keep them. That's in the southern sector. But an average studio is $800, average one bedroom is $1,060 in the southern sector, brand new apartment. We're keeping them right now at $763. Average two bedroom, $1,420. And we have them at $900 to $10,000. So we're trying to make them affordable, trying to keep an affordability. But on the average, three bedrooms, $1,990, four bedrooms, $2,600. So who can afford that? Because even though we're building and building, wages are not going up. I mean, they keep saying it's a good economy, but I don't see the wages going up. And so when that don't go up, it's going to be harder on the low income. And I'm talking about lower than 120%. I'm talking about 80% of the median income. So, like I said, I could have let Sandy keep going because I didn't bring a PowerPoint. But I do want to say affordable housing is very much needed. It's very much, we have to pass, we have to get past, this is mine, this is yours. Look at the north and the south. And we see it coming now. We see development coming that way. If we can't build affordable housing in the southern sector, it's all going to be mixed income. It's all going to be high-end housing. There's no doubt about it. So you can't say we're going to start out here and wait till it come in. By the time you come in, everybody's going to be moved out. And it's going to be just like you see in West Dallas, Bishop Arts, Uptown, you name it. We'll have a Lancaster Quarter like that, and we'll have a Fair Park, South Dallas like that. And at some point, we're gonna have to say, that's why I appreciate groups like y'all, the political will to be talking to your council members and say, hey, we're losing. With that.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Sherman. Now we have Janet Ahmad. Janet is from Austin area.
San Antonio.
San Antonio area, sorry. And she has been very instrumental in exposing construction fraud, I guess, is the way to put it. And has done a lot of research and advocacy in terms of federal funds going to housing. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I certainly do appreciate being able to come and speak to the League of Women Voters here in the Dallas area. You've got a task, and I've tried to listen very carefully. I agree with Sandy and agree with Myriam on a lot of these issues. Same things are happening in San Antonio. So what happens in here has already happened in San Antonio. Already happened. We're starting it in San Antonio. The housing crisis has been terrible for the economy and lots of things in our lives. It changes everything. And the topic keeps coming up, affordable housing, and I've always said, at what price? And I think that what happened when all the mortgage fraud started, if you just knew it was coming and what could you do about it, it was almost impossible. Because along with that came deregulation. And so cities have been deregulated, HUD has been deregulated, and I haven't even gotten to my talking points. It's a never-ending task. And I think, though, we have had a spurt in the economy. It's amazing that we recovered as well as we did. That's something to be said. But we're still living with defective houses that were abandoned, houses that have construction defects. It never ended. It wasn't about building a sustainable housing, even in public housing, Section 8 and so forth. We've had our big debacles in San Antonio. Federal government has poured money into losing projects. You need to get it right. You need to listen to the people, number one, I think. Their voices are often not heard. And maybe a little history will help us understand how this really happened. And the history starts back in 1985 when you remember that all S&Ls went down. We don't have them anymore. Why? Because we had mortgage fraud, didn't we? It was deregulated. They know the reasons, the 3 reasons why the S&Ls went under. Money was just thrown around. They could do anything they wanted. They didn't bother to abide by the rules. Less than 5 years later, around 1990, they were the home building industry was well established on the next housing bubble, the next housing crisis. This time they were targeting and using minorities. And home ownership was titled as the minority of this, is that housing is a right of minorities. And then they steered, as the word steering they call it, putting those people in different areas, isolating them, started the same type of thing. But they not only did that, but as you know, they gave people loans they couldn't afford. You walked into that house or that model home, and it was an all-in-one, oh, you're approved. Then you go to move into the house and things go wrong. At the very last minute, you've been priced out of the market. You don't know it yet, but that's coming. That's after you've moved in. So then, here's how it happened. Henry Cisneros, our former mayor of San Antonio, is a builder today. He didn't start out being a builder, and he became secretary of HUD after he was a junior city councilman that I remember talking to years ago when he came to San Antonio. When you're talking to Henry Cisneros, he's a very fine gentleman. You're the most important person in front of him. He's good, very good. When he went to Washington, though, as secretary of HUD, he deregulated for the home building industry. One of the things that happened is that the Code of Federal Regulation was abolished, basically. It's still there. It really never went away, and that's the wrong way of saying it. But it just kind of hidden somewhere, kind of like I guess I always like to say, like the Ark of the Covenant, somewhere we can't find it. And the federal government was very clear that if a property doesn't comply with the Code of Federal Regulations, it's ineligible for HUD funding, a very important thing to know. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a lot of houses out there that never comply with the Code of Federal Regulations because the federal government dropped that authority down to the state level, the city level, and you ask an official, the authority. For example, Henry Cisneros said, Secretary of HUD, and they call it issuing a letter, that HUD would no longer approve subdivisions. That was the biggest problem. If the cities were going to do that. So you go to the city today, and I don't care which city you go to, you ask them about the Code of Federal Regulations. Oh, well, that's something on the federal level. It's because they never adopted it. That may be one of the fine things that they've dropped off of the face of the earth, is regulation that if it doesn't comply with the standards, you can't fund it. That includes some of the Section 8, the vouchers that they get. It's happened in San Antonio. But I'm not here to talk about San Antonio, that their plan was well laid. It used the HUD's federal housing funds. The National Association of Home Builders and its members, being developers as well, began their HUD deregulation in 1992 and 3 to fund the plans for low-income housing boom, armed with carefully scripted and marketing strategies to elevate the unregulated low-income housing building that was to take place. And it became a Wall Street. I want to emphasize this, and I hope I'm going to articulate this well, but it was known as the housing. Has anybody ever hear about it until that time? That there was a housing market, which is a chief economic indicator. It went boom. Now it's coming back up. They're using the same rules and the regulations and the same policy of targeting minorities, which we're trying to help. People that can't afford homes. And when they get in those homes, they can't afford them because they are not sustainable. You can't sue the builder. You can't do anything because the builder's not accountable. And you turn to HUD, they are not enforcing the federal standards. So the houses we're selling don't comply with the standards, such as it's not eligible if you're building on expansive soil. The builders say you have to expect your house to move and dance all over the place. You better water the foundation. Forget your flowers. But you better water that foundation because it's going to crack. It was built to crack. Home builders say that. It's normal. You can have so many cracks in the ceilings. You can have so many cracks, and they start getting it down to the numbers. about how many cracks you're allowed to have. You should have heard what went on in Austin when we introduced a home limit law. It's a simple process. And I think it starts with, number one, let's make sure that our counties, forget the county, they can do anything they want. They have no authority to do anything. And you're putting the housing authority, the projects out in counties, you're putting them all over the place. But there's no enforcement to see that they're going to be sustainable. And I think that's the issue. Let me explain how their marketing technique went. Because I've heard someone say they don't like the title low income. You hear, I don't like affordable housing. Well, it was the home builders and their strategy when they began this. They called it low income and they thought, no, we got to bump it up a little bit. So they called them starter homes too. Then they called them the affordable housing, and that was hung in there for quite some time. Where is affordable housing today? A $200,000, $500,000 HUD-funded McMansion? That's happening in our country. This is just not in Dallas, San Antonio, all over Texas, all over California, all over Georgia, Florida. And the houses are blowing away in the storms we're having. They shouldn't be doing that. So we don't have that big of a problem with the houses blowing away here, but the siding blows off because it's made of the same material as a plastic commemorative cup at the Stop and Go. That's not a sustainable situation, but that's what you get. And that is recycled back in when everything went under. The 2008, it all collapsed. A scheme with the distinction for the cause of the world's worst financial market collapse and recession. Dallas was no different than San Antonio or Austin, Houston. We've been all over Texas. And a lot of it hits the military. Because the military is who they targeted because they know they're not going to be in an area for maybe 2 years. And they knew they could build houses and they wouldn't be held accountable. Now the contracts say you can't sue the builder from the very beginning, and you've agreed to it, even though nobody pointed it out to you. So we've lost our right and freedoms of being able to sue a builder when he builds a bad house. We can't tell our neighbors anything. They get them in. We got 560 houses bought back. How did we do it? Those homeowners spoke up. We took them to the Capitol. We spoke to the legislature. We filed the first bill in 2000 in Washington, D.C. about binding arbitration. Anybody ever hear of binding arbitration? Yes. It's not the consumer's friend. Not at all. It's saying a bad thing of the intent of that person that you're paying good money to when they have a non-suit clause in your contract. So the issues are many. They're not getting solved as well as we would like. We give them tries. The efforts that you're making here in Dallas, listen to where they failed already. I've seen it in the housing programs, as I mentioned. We had Marisol. We had houses falling off. You may have seen it. That was international. The houses were falling off of a hillside that were 3 months old. They were moving at, I believe it was 4 inches every 15 minutes. So brand new houses just moved into it. That's because that was a man-made hill. They wanted to add another whole street of houses. So San Antonio handled that, but you can't sue. So you're priced out of the market. Homeowners, so again, it comes back to affordable at what price? When you're priced out of the market. So, and there are a lot of other factors that I'm sure you couldn't even include in that, like they raise the HOA dues, etc. They get into an area that you can afford that payment every month, but you can't afford what's happening in the rest of the community when the property values go down, when they've sold the houses to investors rather than homeowners, and telling the homeowners, we don't sell to investors, we only sell to homeowners. And when they tell a black family, well, you don't need this subdivision, we're going to send you over there because they really have a better selection. And a difference between brick and plastic siding, vinyl siding, I think they call it. But, and they price them the same. In fact, they price the brick houses lower than they did the ones that didn't have the brick on them. Now, something's wrong. They get what the market will bear. And whatever their message is in their marketing. And we've got to get our cities to do a better job. I think that a lemon law did an awful lot for cars. They make them much safer. They make them more, I don't know that they're more affordable, but I don't think they went up for that reason. They went up with their. And we like lots of little fancy things on our cars too. So, I really do thank you for, and I don't know where I am on my time, but I'm glad it's over. And I didn't pay much attention to my notes, but one other thing, I do have a lot of all this documentation about how they actually falsified 92-541s, which is a federal form. The builders did it as a matter of practice, that they promised that the house was built in accordance with 92-541 of the Federal Code of Regulations. I think 200-920-60 if you want to look it up. And they did. They said, was it built on expansive soil? No. Well, it was. So it's falsified, and they did it en masse, and are still doing it. Mortgage fraud is continuing, but it's not in the news. So thank you very much.